Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are back. Another week, another episode of the Ex Homeschoolers Club. I am, of course, your host, Jacob Gooden. And this week is going to be fun. I have my friend Adam Gaus on. I until recently didn't actually know that Adam was a homeschool kid. We went to college together and we were in band together and all kinds of stuff. We're going to get into all that. But yeah, until recently, I had really no clue that he was a homeschool kid. So we're going to hear about his experience. But before we do that, I have a couple things to ask you. Number one, if you enjoy the show, please share it with a friend. Pick your favorite episode, shoot him a text, say, hey, what's up? Hey, by the way, there's this podcast out with our good buddy Jacob Gooden, and you should give it a listen and a follow and all of the good things. So there's that. The second thing is I want to know from you guys what you want to hear on this show. The best way to do that, I now have a 6-question survey. Okay. There's a link. It's going to be the top link in the description of this video, of this episode. Click it. 2 of the questions are just your name and your email address. The rest of them are questions about more things you want to hear, people you want to hear on the episodes, and some other community related things. So give that a click. We can wait. Pause it if you need to. Okay. We're back. So without further ado, let's get into the episode. Adam, welcome to the Ex Homeschoolers Club.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited. I have never been on a podcast before, so let's see how this goes.
I'm amazed because your wife also has a podcast, and
She is a
needs to have
podcaster.
you. Yeah, she needs to have you on her show. Shout out to Niche Knowledge and Nonsense.
Yes,
If you haven't listened to that show, go check it out. It's amazing. But yeah, no, I'm beating her to it. So
absolutely. Maybe this will
Adam,
be the what gets her to finally invite me on the show.
yeah, hopefully she'll hear how good you are on the microphone, and she'll know
Of
it needs to
course.
happen.
Yeah.
So Adam, you and I know each other. We met in college, really early on in
hmm
college. Well, at least for me, I think your sophomore year. But
Were we
uh,
the same year, or no? You came after.
I got into college in 2014.
I think I started in 2013.
Okay, yeah, but I know for me it was very
Well,
early
no,
on
that's not
because
true. I
no,
started in 2012 because I graduated in 2016. So
okay,
we overlapped for 2 years at Greenville.
okay, yeah. I met you very early on though because we took a band class together and got put in a band
hmm
together. It was like one of those like just almost draw names from a hat type of thing.
Yes.
And so it's these random band
I'll bet
assignments.
I'll bet that you probably remember that way better than I do because it was your freshman year and it would have been my junior year. So
Yeah,
like for me it was just like whatever, let's just get this over with. I have crap to do after class, you know.
absolutely. No, well, it was definitely like it was kind of a filler class. Let's be honest.
A little bit.
But yeah, we were in a band together with. Yeah, I think you really got stuck in a band with all freshmen, which
Mhm.
probably also wasn't super fun. But
That was a symptom of my changing majors a little late, so I had to get that class in which I would have probably taken as a freshman, but then I was in it as a junior, you know.
yeah,
So, it's all
yeah.
good.
Hey, it happens. But we ended up getting to know each other. Your wife
Mhm.
also went to college with us. She and my wife were roommates at one point, and so our lives have definitely overlapped a little
Oh
bit.
yeah.
And then, yeah, and then we've just kind of stayed in rough contact, I guess, over the years.
Mhm.
Um, but
I think
yeah,
I
I
follow you
didn't.
on Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. We're
I
friends on
think.
Facebook. So yeah, I didn't know you were a homeschool kid until
Mhm.
I was chatting with your wife because she has a podcast, and since I work in podcasting, we've chatted a few times, and she brought up that you were homeschooled, and I was like, no way. I would have, first of all, never guessed that in a million years. But secondly, I was like, okay, I think Adam needs to come on the show because I want to hear this story and I want to hear all of these things. So give me kind of the rundown. What was your homeschool experience like? You know, set the stage a little bit
Yeah.
of like family life and all those types of things.
I know probably everybody's going to say this, but I feel like I had a unique experience as a homeschooler because I was what I would consider 50-50. For about half of my education, I attended a public school. And then the other half of it, it was, of course, homeschooled. And so that divide was like, I think I was public schooled from early age until 5th grade. And then it was the summer of when I would be going into 6th grade that my mom and dad decided that they wanted to take my older sister and I and put us into homeschooling. And then I have 3 siblings. So then the younger 2 siblings, they decided, you know what? let's put them in public school. Let's just figure out if this works for us. We're just going to do the two older siblings. And it was so successful for my sister and I that they decided the following year to take all four of us and homeschool us. And it wasn't until my junior year of um, high school that I had actually ended up taking a couple of courses at the high school. So I feel like really the only thing I missed out on public school wise was the middle school experience. And I think if anybody's being honest with themselves, like I don't know that there was much that was missed. I think that those years are usually like people's blunder years. They definitely were my blunder years. And so it was probably a good thing that I was insulated from, the behemoth of middle school. So, but that's kind of like a brief rundown of
Okay.
my experience as a homeschooler.
Yeah, that's definitely a unique experience because yeah, I know a lot of families where it's almost the opposite, where they homeschool their
Yeah,
kids pretty much grade school through middle school, and then the high school years or even the junior high years they send them to a public
sure.
school or private school. But yeah, kind of the opposite for you is
Hmm.
interesting. So what like so that transition then from going to public school and then being at home all the time, was that difficult? Because I mean, you're going from like, I'm sure you have friends and you're used to seeing everybody to like,
Yeah,
are you then just stuck at home with mom and and sister and being
pretty
like,
much.
what do we do now?
So that period of my life, well, I guess our family's life was very, very filled with change. It was that summer that we moved from Berrien Springs, Michigan to Herman, Missouri. And a big part of that move, there was really two big reasons. I didn't understand this at the time, but now I do, because I've talked with mom and dad about it. And it was because dad's position at the university was downsized. So he didn't have a job in Michigan.
Right.
So there's nothing holding us there. And my grandma was very close to passing away. So we moved to Missouri to be close to her.
Hmm.
And she passed a few years after we moved there. So we got some good time with her. But so that summer, with that transition to homeschooling, it almost felt like maybe that was the smallest transition,
Okay.
because I had already left all my friends. I didn't have any
Yeah.
friends. I didn't have a school, system that I was familiar with. So it almost felt natural. And just one more thing to change. I don't remember being traumatized or like bummed or,
Yeah.
about homeschooling. I was bummed about moving,
Right.
but it kind of felt seamless almost.
Yeah. I can kind of relate because my parents, I transitioned to homeschool because of a move as well. So I had gone to public
Hmm.
school for through first grade, and then we moved, and yeah, and so second grade kicked off, and I was a homeschool kid. But we moved. It
Yep.
wasn't very far. It was only about 30 minutes away, but it was definitely weird. There were other changes going on. We had bought a fixer upper, that kind of a thing. So there was like we didn't we didn't have like a kitchen. Like we washed dishes in the
The
garage, in the sink in the
bathtub or
garage and
something.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. We had one functioning bathroom. Like it was definitely nutso. So
We had a very similar experience to that when we moved because we moved into my grandpa's he owned a farmstead and the
mhm,
the farmhouse was not habitable when we moved there. So like
okay.
for a month we were living in a tent in the front yard and like mom and dad every day were just working on gutting that house. And so yeah, it was like literally the same experience. We didn't have like toilets, sinks, nothing. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, no, that's so wild. Like I think it's interesting because I've chatted with a few people who have kind of that similar story of like there's big change that happens in life and so on. They just kind of tack homeschool on top of it. And so it
Hmm.
almost feels less like you said, it's not if you do remember that part of your life being a big shift, but your least favorite part of it wasn't changing to homeschool. It was just
Right.
like I didn't want to move.
Yeah.
As opposed to other friends I have who, yeah, they went to public school and then their parents decided to homeschool them. And that was the only change that was really happening. And for them, it was a much bigger situation. So with that kind of that shift and now being homeschooled, so we're looking at that first year. Was there obviously it's a big shift. First experience for you guys, first experience maybe for mom being an educator, but also like, did you, I don't know, did you get involved in homeschool groups that were in the area, or like meet other homeschool families, or did you have kind of a sense of community at all? Because that's one of the biggest things that I think a lot of people, when they hear homeschool, they just hear isolation and,
Yep.
antisocial, right?
Hmm.
So,
So yeah, mom and dad were not educators before that. Dad
okay.
had spent a lot of time in higher curriculum. His
Mhm.
my grandpa, his dad was a professor at Mizzou, and dad went there for his PhD program. So I think dad was very familiar with education, being a professor's son and spending a lot of time, So there was that experience that I'm sure that they pulled off of. Um, but no, not really. Mom has always been kind of a just let's just do it. Roll my
Mhm.
sleeves up, let's do it. And so I think a big thing that emboldened them to make that decision and probably, was a big factor was that we were involved with a church very early after moving to Herman. And in that church, there were many families that homeschooled. So I'm
Okay.
sure that during that summer, where I think one of the first things mom and dad did when we moved there during that summer was find a church family because that was important to
Yeah.
them. And so that was probably very, very big for them to have that support, that system, those people that and can make friends with. You have a
Yeah.
common bond. So yeah, I'm sure mom had conversations with the other moms and dad talked, with the other dads and they figured out that homeschooling was an option.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we did have a community. We did have other
Okay.
homeschoolers. We did things together. It was good in that
Yeah.
sense.
I just had a conversation with my mom, and I was kind of piecing together some of the things of like when we got started, because my memory was a lot of like feeling isolated. But one of
Mhm.
the things that she was telling me was that, yeah, for her as well, she was like, she had met other homeschool moms and was already living in community with other homeschool moms. And so, kind of doing this, like, they were encouraging her to be like, hey, you should at least just like think about it, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And then when she bit the bullet, they were like, "Okay, here's what you're gonna join, right? You're gonna be a part of this association, and you're gonna join this group of homeschool kids." And so we kind of had a built-in community. Unfortunately, it was still like 30 minutes away, but but it was
Sure.
at least there. I still had like friends and stuff, and I think that was like it. It helped, right? Because again, it's like one of those things where I think so many people think of homeschool kids as just these like isolated
These
weirdos, where it's like
weird, isolated little
yeah,
nobodies.
exactly.
Yeah.
We don't know anybody, like, we don't know how to
We
talk to
don't do anything.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And, um, and my dad always told me, he's like, the thing that was different with, like, my sister and I, he's like, "You guys could talk to, like, adults and, like, have a conversation with them and carry conversation." And he's like, "I don't know if I can 100% attribute that to, like, being homeschooled, but, like, he's like, I think it was partly that because you just had no fear to go up to somebody and start a conversation." I don't know, maybe that's the
I can
weirdo
kind of feel
homeschooler.
the same way. Like, yeah, I remember, articulating with the other homeschool moms frequently. Like, we would be out
Mhm.
on play dates or something with the other kids, and they would be my guardian for the day. And, they
Right.
were basically the mom figure or the dad
Yeah.
figure. So, yeah,
Did you guys do anything along the lines of, like, co-ops or anything where you would go to somebody's house for, like, a class, more of a classroom setting where you had other kids, like, doing the same thing? Or was it very much like, we get together and have play dates, but, like, you have your homeschool, I have my homeschool, and it's all kind of more individualized?
definitely the latter option. I don't think I ever recall a time where we would co-op like that. It was always school was at home. Usually it was like morning times were for school and then afternoons were for socializing. That's when we would do activities with the other moms, the other
Okay.
families.
Yeah. So you also brought up that when you got into high school, you started also taking some additional classes at the local
Yep.
high school. So what did that look like? Like, what was the kind of that 50-50 split there?
Mom was my main educator. Dad
Mhm.
was, working outside the home. So mom was the main educator and she did not feel up to par teaching specific subjects at a high school level. And the reason for that is you have to have so many credits to graduate. I mean,
Right.
that's you have to have it like that's maybe one thing people don't understand about homeschool. Or maybe they do. I don't know. I've always had to explain this to people. It's like you don't just get to do what you want. There's
Mhm.
a very clearly defined set of tests you have to pass, curriculum you have to undertake. They have to be approved. I think mom had them approved like by the state of Missouri. So there were benchmarks to make
Yeah.
for my education, and two of the subjects that she did not feel like she had the ability to teach me to pass, was math and art. She's not
Okay.
artistic, and unless
Yeah.
you're a math whiz or a genius, math just sucks. I mean, sorry guys. If you
Yeah.
like math, I don't know what to tell you. Math is awful.
Adam and I are cut more from the creative cloth, so
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, what she ended up doing was researching options for someone in her situation where she had a student that, her child or student that needed these credits and wasn't sure how to get them. And it came up that you can actually, I don't know if this is everywhere or if it was just in Herman, Missouri, you can just take a class, much like a college.
Mhm.
You can just sign up for a class, show up, take the class. Maybe it was a special arrangement with the school because of this, Herman is a smaller community, and the school's like, yeah, we'll do him a solid. Well, he can attend for that class as long as, I'm sure she probably had to send over like documentation of my education so that, mom and
Yeah.
dad didn't end up going to prison, for
Yeah.
failing to educate me. But so
Yeah.
yeah, I signed up for two art classes, art one and art two, junior and
Okay.
senior year. And then I took geometry junior year and algebra two senior year. I think I took
Okay.
algebra one at home.
You brought up something that I've recently had a talk with somebody about this because so California actually has some of I grew up in California, so it
Hmm.
has some of the most lax home education rules.
Really?
So so you can do all of you do have to submit things to the state and you
Yeah.
are like a private education you're a private school, right? Other kids could enroll in your school if you wanted them to.
Yeah.
Um but you're a home educator, so but the way there's not this process really of like, "Hey, like, submit your curriculum and we approve it, we say this is good." Like, there's a lot more flex to it and things, and
Hmm.
so, unfortunately, there's some good and there's some bad to that, right? Like,
Yeah.
it does
Yeah.
open up more of the ability to kind of create some really cool curriculums. However, it also for the people who are maybe a little bit more the bad actors in the space and they don't actually teach their kids anything can get away with a lot more, right? And then you end up with
Sure.
some other kids. But I was looking into a couple other states and I was like, okay, this is interesting because there are some states where yeah, you have to go take standardized testing so as a way to also prove that your kid is educated enough to go on, right? To continue on,
Hmm.
which is good. And then, like you said, you have to submit your curriculum choices to the state to kind of get them approved or explain yourself to them. So that's definitely an interesting difference. I don't know that I've had very many guests who have been able to kind of like talk to that because a lot of my friends like we didn't do very much standardized testing or the few times that we did it was just not consistent, right?
Hmm.
um so, kind of interesting. Thankfully, I had a mom who was like, "I'm gonna keep really good records." Her
Yes.
goal was get me to college, so she was like,
Yep.
"You have to have all this stuff," which, I mean, obviously your mom also was kinda had that mindset of like, "My kids need to be able to go to college if they want to," right?
Yes. That was very important to her. I remember having the discussion every year of, all right, the end of the school year is coming up. You have to have
Mm,
this done. You have to have this done. You have to take this test. It needs to be done by this date so I can send it off. And um, kind of something I want to bring up here is maybe trying to steer the conversation myself a little bit. I feel like that experience of being responsible for my own education, in a sense, has shaped who I am today greatly because
okay.
my sense of responsibility to getting things done and meeting expectations and deadlines, I feel like I have benefited from that experience in high school greatly. Or
Mhm.
yeah, well, not high school, homeschool, sorry, because of that. It was on us. It was me and
Yeah.
mom, and if we didn't get it done, I didn't get an education, and so that was a value that was instilled in me early.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a conversation with a friend and we were talking about getting to college and she was also homeschooled
Hmm.
and one of the things she brought up was that she had friends who they had been public school all the way through and they struggled in college for different reasons than her and I struggled in college. I struggled a
Yes.
little bit more with the social aspect, but when it came to
Yep.
schoolwork, I was like
You
I was
just got it
good
done.
because I had
Yeah.
the motivation to just, like, do it and, like, set aside the time. I knew how much time I needed to get it done, and I just did it.
Mhm.
And so very rarely were things late. But, yeah, but then there were other students who, yeah, you could tell they just struggled a lot more with the deadlines thing because of the
Yep.
fact that
Scheduling, time management.
exactly, they didn't have that. So, that is a huge benefit, I think, to if you do homeschool, I'm gonna say right, um, there's that ownership piece of, like, as a student, you have ownership over the fact that, like, you gotta do
Mhm.
this, you know? 'Cause usually mom and dad are in addition to playing teacher, they're also still mom and dad, and they got a
And
billion
trying
things on their
to
plate anyways,
yeah,
and try
pay the
to
bills
figure
and
it out.
stuff.
So, yeah, so they need you to have some ownership over it, which is, important, it's good, and like you said, it
Yeah.
shaped you into who you are today, and so, yeah, so let's talk a little bit, I guess, more about that transition into college. You definitely
Mhm.
had probably, to some degree, a little bit better of an understanding of, like, I mean, your mom was keeping good records, going to college was seems like talked about consistently at your house, so, like,
Yeah.
was college always in the plans? Was it, were you thinking about other things?
Pretty much, pretty much. I had a lot of people tell me that I needed to go to college, and I think that's a very, universal experience for millennials and
Yeah,
maybe even for Gen Z,
yeah,
and people younger is the stress that was placed on attending college. So I had picked out, very many colleges to look at and eventually, settled on Greenville, which,
mhm,
the rest is history there. I think that my experience at Greenville was good. But yeah, we'll talk about that in a second. The transition, it was strange. I remember choosing Greenville, applying, getting accepted, and attending, and just being absolutely in love with Greenville campus. You know what I mean? That
okay,
first visit, and you're like,
yeah.
this is gonna be good.
Yeah.
Oh man, how naive we were. But
I had a similar experience. I mean, it was interesting because I originally didn't wanna leave the state, or if I did, I was
yeah,
like, "Okay, maybe some of the closer states," but
wasn't that
really
the
I
thing with Greenville? Is that they didn't have out of state tuition? I think that was the thing.
um, it might have been, and, the for me, I wanted to major in audio engineering, so I was
Yep,
like,
same.
there was limited schools who were doing that, a lot of the schools that advertise it tend to be kind of like the Full Sail style schools where it's like,
Mhm.
"We're not a traditional education," kind of a thing. "We're
Yep.
actually a scam." Um, and so I was, like, talking as much as I could, I was talking to, like, audio professionals to kind of be like, "What do I need to do?" And a lot of them were like, "It honestly doesn't really matter if you have an audio engineering degree or not." But they were
Yeah.
like, "But you should find a school that has a program like that and has a traditional education because it will take you further." And I was like, "Okay."
Yes.
Found Greenville, like you, I toured it, I fell in love with it, I spent the night, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I think this is the place," and then moved, and yeah, I my first year, I struggled with being so far away from family, but aside from that, I loved it there. I loved college. I thought it was fantastic, it's like,
Yeah,
I'm on my own,
I remember
making
the
new
same thing.
friends, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and then we woke
absolutely.
up finally to to what Greenville was, because Greenville, I don't know if this was a factor for you, but we haven't even touched on the fact that, like, religion played a big part in both of our homeschool experiences,
Mhm,
and we were going to church consistently. Greenville was a Christian campus, and so for me, some
mhm.
of the things that were attractive to it were things like the lifestyle statement
Yep.
and the fact that there was like a billion and one churches inside that little town.
Yes.
And I liked it because I still felt safe. Like it felt like a bigger homeschool bubble in a lot of ways.
I absolutely can agree with that. It it definitely had that vibe of it felt like a youth group.
Yeah.
Like, it legit felt like an adult, the next level youth group, and I think that if I were to let's say there's like a strange turn of events and I were to like consider attending something like that today with my current knowledge, I'd be like, absolutely not. It's a cult. I'm gonna walk away. But at the time, I was super into it, and I think that that was one of the main things that attracted me to it, and probably helped the transition from living in Herman to living
Mm.
at Greenville. Was
Yeah.
that feeling, the vespers on Thursday nights, and you know
it was comfortable. It was definitely yeah,
Mhm.
I just agree with you. It was just kind of that, like, next step because you brought it up before we hit record, but, like, I mean, well, and you brought it up even in while we were recording, is that, like,
Mhm.
your parents you were involved in a church that had a lot of
Mhm.
homeschool kids. That church, it sounds like, played a big significant role throughout kind of childhood and those high school years in
Absolutely.
particular. Um, so I don't know about you. I can speak to myself. I mean, I was heavily involved in things like youth group. I served in the worship ministry. I was like,
Yep.
I would stack chairs on Sunday and do Bible study and community group and every other thing I could get my hands on. I would do that. Is that kind of a similar
Mhm.
thing for you?
100%. Being, mom and dad raised us to try to be, as much like Jesus as we could. And so a lot of that was serving, doing things for other people, being involved in church activities, like you said, stacking chairs, helping with the sound booth. I played on the
Yeah.
worship team.
I think it was just normal, like, and then, yeah, the
That
transition
was
to Greenville,
normal.
it just felt normal, right? It was just, like, continue doing the same thing. I know for
Mhm.
me, one of the big things, the reason I burned out of church was because honestly, at Greenville, I was going to church, like, things 6 days a week. I had
Right.
1 day off, and I was like, I after 6 months of that, I was like, "I can't do this anymore." I was like, "I need a break
Yeah.
somewhere."
I think by my senior year, I was only attending the church services that Greenville put on to the number minimum you had to attend to graduate. Like,
Yeah.
I had it mapped out how many vespers I needed to attend, and, I was always bringing homework and sitting in the balcony, like.
Yeah. No, that same. I think I even just kind of at one point said, like, "Screw it." Like, what are they gonna do? They're not gonna let me
Yeah,
graduate because I didn't go to
right,
church? Like, I don't know.
right. Actually,
Um,
I think that was the thing. I think, like, they were saying you couldn't graduate, but I bet you they probably couldn't prevent you.
I mean, I don't know. I was I don't know. I feel bad for this, but I would always go in, especially I was lucky and unlucky by my senior year because I was having some health issues and also I had a grandparent who was dying at the time and stuff like that. So I feel like
Man.
I got a lot more leeway because I had a lot of these
Mm.
things that I could go in and be like, "Oh, but I couldn't even get out of bed or I couldn't whatever." And
Yep,
they'd be like, "Oh, yeah, sign the paper. It's all good. You're
yep,
good."
yep.
To kind of transition, I guess a little bit off of that. Now, so you're dad now. You got two kids, two wonderful kids
Mhm.
who are they're both in school.
School
They're
age.
school age.
Yep.
And so what has I guess like you did the homeschool thing, you're married to somebody who
Mhm.
didn't do the homeschool thing. What, like I guess what has shaped, like, your thoughts when it comes to your kids' education now?
So, I want to say early on in Bryn's life. Bryn is my daughter, she's 6 now,
Okay.
and Atticus is my son, and he's 4, so they are in kindergarten and preschool respectively. Early on in her life, Bailey and I agreed she would be attending the public school system.
Mhm.
Private school's out of the question, that's super expensive.
Yeah.
If you can send your kid to private school, like, I don't know, screw you, like, share a little bit of that wealth around, man, like, that's so
Yeah.
much money to spend on what you could get for free, but anyway, people have their reasons, I'm
Yeah.
not judging. Um, and homeschool also is not really an option. I work full time to pay the bills, and Bailey is at home with the kids currently. That's our, we're really sticking it to the patriarchy there with that arrangement, but it's working out for our family.
Yeah.
And she's just not interested in homeschooling. And I respect her for knowing her limitations because it is a challenge. Homeschooling is not for
Yeah.
everyone. It requires a certain type of person, a certain, um, it's a lot of responsibility to take on. In addition to, like what you mentioned earlier, nothing else stops. You're
Right.
homeschooling, but you also have to go to work. You also have to
Mhm.
pay the bills. You have to maintain your household. All the things that are involved with that don't go away when you just decide to be an educator as well. So that's a big deciding factor for us. And I
Yeah.
think that if the situation were different, I would love to consider the possibility of homeschooling.
Mhm.
And I'm not necessarily saying that that's not possible in the future.
Right.
Let's say situations change and opportunities arise and whatnot. But for now, yeah. So we're definitely taking advantage of the fact that public schooling exists and just placing our trust in it. I spent half of my education in the public school system. Bailey spent her whole education in the public school system. I think that as long as you are supportive of your child and
Mhm.
making sure that they're benefiting from their education and being involved in their life, you can get a good education from what is available in the public school system. It's not without its faults. That's not what I'm trying
Yeah.
to say. But so that's kind of where we're at as parents with our kids, is just, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's not the vibe. This is the homeschoolers podcast.
No, you're all good. It's funny because I think I got to run the numbers at some point, but of the people I've talked to and kind of asked that,
Yeah.
I usually ask them, well, one, if they have kids or if they're thinking about having kids, or if someone comes to them and says, "Oh, would you recommend homeschool?" It's like, it's pretty high that most of them are like, "No, don't don't go down that
Heavily
rabbit hole."
dependent on you and your lifestyle, but probably no.
Exactly. And but I think the thing that you said that I think is, this is what I tell any parent, is just the fact that it's like you being involved in your kid's life and understanding how their thinking works, and how, like, if they have learning disabilities, or they just learn differently, or they have whatever, it's like if you as a parent can understand that, regardless of if they go to public school, private school, or they're home educated, you can advocate for
Mhm.
them to have the best education they possibly can.
Yep.
And learning never stops. If you don't want it to, right? It's like you can also foster that healthy desire to always be learning about the things that they're interested in. And so,
Absolutely.
you know, I definitely, that's encouraging to hear, because it's just, I
Yeah.
don't know. I had parents who they encouraged me to always chase the things I was interested in.
Mhm.
And if I ever have kids or nieces and nephews, that's, I want to do that to them too. Is like I want to provide them with that as well. It's just like go after the things that you love.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely. And our transition from young childhood to early school years has not been without its challenges,
mhm,
particularly with my son. And I think that this is a big reason why we are going to go with public schooling for him, especially. Not that like we're like sitting here talking about it, but I think that the fact that this will be such an advantage to him is that we had some significant issues with him going into preschool. So my daughter is ADHD, which is very common for kids. In fact, most of the time, I think people will like grow out of that. So like, part of me is like, is it actually ADHD or is it just them being a kid? But then again, I'm not, a psychiatrist or a psychologist or whatever. So
yeah,
take what I say with a grain of salt on that subject. So my son is probably the same. I think I probably could have been diagnosed when I was a kid, Bailey as well. So we're just a crazy bunch of people over here.
yeah,
We're uh but anyway, his he started preschool and it just was not good. What we ended up doing is there's a school in town called the Early Childhood and Family Center, and they exist mainly for like less privileged or disadvantaged families. So they have like an assessment they do, and they take all factors of a child's life and whether or not they can attend there. And Bryn got in, and it was really good, her experience at the Early Childhood Center. And so we naturally signed my son up, and
mhm,
he was not qualified for whatever reason. He's too dang smart or something. I make too much money, whatever reason they
yeah,
told him that he couldn't attend. And so we decided to sign him up for a Montessori school, which is a
okay,
whole nother style of education that I don't
right,
think has been brought up yet. And I think that that style, if you don't know what Montessori education is, it's basically student led education. So the child will steer their own schooling. It's a very wild concept to me when you say it out loud like that. But I think the idea is to foster that sense of wonder that we were just talking about, that sense of
yeah,
always wanting to learn new things. And I think it can be good. I mean, the school had high ratings. We were
mhm,
going to have to end up paying for it, but it was affordable because of he was only going to go like part of the day or something.
yeah,
Well, that student-led thing did not work out for my son. He just would not listen to the teachers. He was, like, stealing toys from other kids, and, there were even a couple times where he would, like, hit another kid, and
oh
so we
no,
ended up taking him out of that and putting him we reapplied to the early childhood center, and he was eventually, uh approved to go into that. So he's now in school now. He started, I think it was like December 5th or something. So he
Okay.
got a little bit of a late start to his education, but that's where we're at with our kids, a little bit of a
Y-
rocky start.
Yeah, I mean, hey, everybody learns differently, right? It's like
Hmm.
I my sister has ADD and dyslexia, and but I don't, and so I could sit there and read a book
Yeah.
for hours, and it just
Yeah.
my brain just would absorb it. But she's an auditory learner, and so for her, yeah, having it read to her or whatever. So it was interesting. That was an advantage I think for me growing up in the homeschool community was like we had such a vast variety of kids who had all different types of learning capabilities
Yes.
and needs, and we learned to just play with each other, right? We learned how to
Yep.
understand each other. And it's come in super beneficial now as an adult. I worked in a toy store for a number of years, and we would do birthday parties, and kids would come in, and there'd be that one kid who he just got invited because he's in the class, kind of a thing, but
Hmm.
nobody really likes him. And it's because he's a little different, right? But
Sure.
I understood that it's like, well, they just need this, and
Yep.
not to toot my own horn, but it was always interesting because the parents usually would come up afterwards and be like, how do you like, are you an educator? I'm like, no, I just grew up with friends who also, are like that. And so we
Yeah.
just knew, here's when you give your space, here's when you lean really in, all those types of things.
Yeah.
And so learning your kid's style of learning and just their personalities is like you and Bailey are, you're the best equipped to lean into that and figure it out because you get to
Absolutely.
see it every single day.
Yeah.
I have been wondering how homeschooling, I don't know, this is kind of a new concept that I've been introducing to the show, is kind of this like how homeschooling impacted your relationship with like your parents and your siblings years later. And what I mean by that is like, do you have like differing views than like your siblings? Like the way I look at homeschooling, I had a very positive experience, but I
Hmm.
know for other people it wasn't, right? And so, and even with people I've talked to now, I'm like their siblings are like all super gung ho for homeschooling and going to do it for their kids, and they themselves are like, nah, I'm good. I want to do public school and that kind of thing. But I I'm trying to flesh out, I guess, the question here a little bit better. But like, how have you seen that your homeschool experience within like your family and stuff has shaped your family relationship, with your siblings and your parents, like where you look back on it kind of differently than them, almost like in a disagreement kind of a way, or you guys have kind of a similar like and dislike for it?
This is a really difficult question to answer.
I know it's like
It's
really big and
super
brainy. I'm
deep.
sorry.
It's okay. I'm here for it. I would say that I think that one of the things that homeschooling has significantly benefited, and that I would share the sentiment with my siblings, is the ability to like, what am I trying to say? The ability to be critical of what you're learning,
Hmm.
verify information for yourself,
Yeah.
because when you're your own teacher, which, I mean, maybe this was your experience, maybe it wasn't. Mom wasn't like actively sitting there teaching me stuff all the time.
Right.
I was mostly just going through my curriculum on my own, and then mom was in the room. If I had a question or didn't understand something, she could go over it with me.
Right.
So that ability to take in information, process it, catalog it, and figure out, okay, this is this, that is that, you know,
Yeah.
organize it. That, I feel like I have seen my siblings and I, not necessarily uniquely, but I'll use that word, uniquely in the world, be able to sift through, navigate life's challenges.
Yeah.
There's like a self dependency to us that I do not observe in some other people that you
Mhm.
encounter in life. And so I think that, on the by and large, my siblings and I would all say that homeschooling was a good experience, and I think that my parents would share that same sentiment. But I think that we're just going to turn the stone over. I think that one of the things that homeschooling might have actually done is killed, personally mine, and I know my brother's because I've spoke to him about it. I haven't really spoke to my sisters about it, but like that, the religion aspect of our lives, I kind of have critical think to my way out of that, and that's a
Okay.
personal decision.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of like the vibe in my family now is that like my mom even, which surprises me, has shared with me that she's not super big into church anymore, and it was because of that time in Herman and her buying into it fully and not getting back that same effort from her peers in the church. And so yeah, I think that maybe I answered your question, or maybe the question just prompted a thought, but
Yeah, no, I that's really what it's meant to do.
yeah.
I I I just did interviews with my parents at the time of recording this. They just went live, and one of the things that we keep them and I keep coming back to is this thought of like, I mean, I took critical thinking. That was a class that I
Right.
had,
Yes, I
and
remember taking something like that too.
yeah, my dad and I, we talked about we did a whole I don't even know, it was a couple months. We read like the Da Vinci Code when the Da Vinci Code was super controversial inside of the church, and we would discuss it and look at it and go, okay, well, this is a work of fiction, right? And like so we could kind
Mhm.
of break it down and kind of come from it from a different point of view. But to your point, we learned how to have critical thinking skills and how to do our own, search for information, find correct information, or find information that, we believed, we resonated with, right? And so,
Mhm.
same as you, that led me down the path of like, I'm no longer religious. I identify as
Mhm.
agnostic, but I
Yeah.
definitely like it took a long time. And then it was really scary to kind of like be like, I don't know. I don't know if you had this experience. I hated and loved that whole experience because I was super angry the entire time, but I also was very much like I just I was like, I don't want to give it up because there was a comfort to it. Like we were talking about with Green Girls, like such
Yes.
a to go from a comfort to a
Absolutely.
comfort.
Yep.
I was like, I don't want to. I just knew it was going to be uncomfortable, and it's this big
Mhm.
scary world out there. And so I was like, I don't know. And then to feel all alone in it, But it's been nice because to your point, my parents and I, we can have discussions on it, and they still are very
Yep.
much involved in church and religion. But we can just have open dialogue and ask questions of
Yeah.
each other and stuff. And I think that that is a lot better than that. Some homeschool kids don't end up with that. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
their parents definitely are just very stuck in the like, I'm your teacher. I'm teaching you the
This
correct
is how it's
thing.
gonna be.
This is how it is, and you either accept it or don't, And if you don't, well,
Yeah.
hasta luego. Um, but that's good that you can have kind of those open conversations. It sounds like with your family
Yeah,
a
I
bit
mean,
more.
I would say that homeschooling made us very close,
Yeah,
you know,
same.
um, and I think that's a big benefit, you know,
Yeah,
a big benefit to homeschooling.
I work on a show right now that it deals a lot with college kids, young, early 20s, um, and they talk about relationships and sex and life being a young person today and how it's shifted and how it's changed. And then they very it's to um they're not old by any means, but older ladies kind of coming in, and then one of them is a therapist, and she talks about that process of being like, if you're a parent and your kid is like, you view it as like them being like defiant or pushing back on whether it's religion or whatever. Usually it's not. It's just them being curious. They're being human, right? They're being curious. They're
Right.
asking questions and that kind of a thing. And so you have two options. You either open yourself up to being able to accept that we can have dialogue around this, or you just close yourself off. And when you close yourself off, it's no wonder that you're going to lose your kids, right?
Yep.
And that's the sad thing. Um,
Mhm.
and so yeah. So if there are parents listening to this, don't shut your kids out, please.
Yeah, take
Have these
notes,
difficult
please.
conversations. Yeah.
Yes.
And it's not easy. I don't know. I don't know about you. I definitely have gone through times with my parents where it's a little bit more strained, or just, conversations can be awkward, but
Yeah.
you just do it, right? You just push
Mhm.
through it, and eventually you'll come out another side of it. And usually it's a little bit better. So
Yeah.
anyway, okay. I gotta ask this to kind of get us maybe a little off the heavy notes, but
Mhm.
is there a cringy homeschool moment that you can remember? And I'll give you an example. It comes up a lot on this show. So if you're playing the Ex Homeschoolers drinking game, I'm going to bring up my red pants. Um, I had skin tight red skinny jeans that I wore. I
Oh
looked like
my
somebody
gosh.
from One Direction. That was kind of the vibe I was going for.
I love
It
it.
was super cringy, and I look back on it, and it's not exclusively a homeschool thing, right? It's just a fashion
Yeah, yeah.
statement of the time. But are there any moments like that that you can think of that you're like that you're willing to share with the class? I guess also.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, hey, there's I have been s I've had some blunder years, let's just leave it at that. And so I'm not really okay, so something that has to do I wrote down some funny stories because I didn't wanna, like, be on the podcast, and you're like, "What's a funny story?" And I'm like,
yeah.
So, specifically with homeschooling, and this still cracks me up to this day, mom and I were like, you know what? We need some elective credits. Like, what if we learned what if you took like a foreign language as a class?
Okay.
And I'm surprised that art made it to the high school public school choice and like
Right. I was
a
kind of
foreign
amazed when you said
language
that too. I
didn't.
was like, art of all things, like just go buy some paint and some brushes and you're good, right?
Yeah, for real. Well, I do appreciate those 2 art classes
Yes.
because truly I learned a lot in them about humanity, the
Mhm.
culture, it's
Right.
not just art.
Right.
It's almost a history course
Yeah.
because you go anyway, we're getting off topic. So I tried to take German as a foreign language as a
Okay.
homeschooler, and the only resources we had was my mom, my dad, and me. And I remember we took about a month of this course of just trying to get wheels off the ground. And the only phrase, well, I probably learned like hello, yes, goodbye, no, whatnot. The only phrase that I remember from this failed German class was Wo ist die Toilette? Which
Okay.
translates to where's the toilet? Which was the first phrase in the book of what you needed to know if you're gonna visit Germany.
Hey, I
So,
mean,
hey, if
if
I
you
ever go to Germany, I'm
yeah,
gonna be
you're prepped.
I
You're
know
ready.
where
That's all
I
you need to know.
"Wo ist die Toilette?"
Yep. I growing up in California, you're surrounded, we're on the border of Mexico technically. If you don't know how to
Mhm.
say donde está el baño,
Yeah.
same thing, you're screwed.
I'm probably
So
saying it wrong too, it's been so many years. My
that's
aunt is
hilarious.
she was a German, native, a Germany she was born in Germany,
Mhm.
and so that was, I think, probably why we chose German because it would be really fun to talk to my aunt
Right.
in German.
Yeah.
And so if you're if you're listening to this on DJ, I'm sorry for butchering how to ask where's the toilet in German. Oh
Oh
my
my gosh.
gosh.
I also struggled with foreign language.
Yeah,
I still can't speak Spanish, but,
I know. That's what I should have chosen. I feel like Spanish would have been a lot easier as a first language or like, well, as a first second language.
Yeah, I think and the thing with choosing like a Latin-based language is then it opens up the door to so many. So if you have the
Mhm.
aspiration of like you want to learn a lot of languages, Spanish tends any of the Latin-based languages tend to be a good
Yeah.
jumping off
Yep.
point. But German's hard.
Oh,
I'm
well.
gonna give it to you. I have an uncle who's
German
German
is
and
yeah.
it I'm like, sometimes I don't even know how he makes certain noises with his mouth that,
Yeah.
it's a difficult
Achtung!
one.
Something like
Yes.
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's a
Anyway,
good one.
there was another experience that we had, and this one was, like, simultaneously cool, I feel like this was a really neat experience, as a homeschooler specifically, because I think it bought me a lot of, like, street cred
Okay.
with the kids in town. I was 15 at the time, but it was also, like, mega cringe, like,
Okay.
mega cringe. So I was, super interested in music from a very young age. I
Okay.
played sports in elementary school,
Mhm.
basketball, soccer, whatnot. But when I became kind of like into my adolescence and started figuring out who am I? What do I like? It was guitar, man. I was obsessed with guitar. I was obsessed with metal, hardcore music, Under Oath, Demon Slayer,
Yeah.
represent,
Yeah.
uh religious Christian metal music was my thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, my parents signed me up for lessons at 12 years old,
Okay.
and we went consistently. I want to say for years, And I was not one of their kids that they had to remind to practice. Like, "You better go upstairs and practice. Your teacher said you have to practice for 30 minutes every day," you know? I
Mhm.
was upstairs playing my guitar for hours and
Yeah.
hours and hours. And so one of the things that we wanted to do is my friends and I at the church, we had, I think all 5 members of the band were kids that went to church. We started this metal band.
'Kay.
But if you know do you know Attack Attack
I
from, like,
do,
back in the
yeah.
day? Like, the People's Elbow, Stick Stickly?
Yeah.
That was what we were trying to be. So we had
Mhm.
a keyboardist, and we were trying to do the whole techno thing, and we had an opportunity to play a show in Hermann, Missouri, and the only other bands that were playing there was one, like, hard rock metal adjacent band that was headlining, kinda like countrified metal rock, if you can imagine it.
Okay.
But everybody else was just like a country band or like a I don't know, pop band. So here
Mhm.
we were, these 15-year-old kids in like what you were saying, like the red skinny jeans, the long side swept hair,
Yeah.
the spiky belt. We roll up to this show and we start playing this horrible, poorly rehearsed, not organized at all metal music, and then all of a sudden we go straight into this like super cringy techno breakdown thing. We had like a choreographed dance that we were doing, and let me tell you, everybody at the palooza was like, what is happening? Except for, and this is the cool part, except for the high schoolers.
Right.
They all came up from the crowd and stood on the steps, and they were getting into it, and I
Right.
wanna say it was because the lead singer was, very popular at school, like, he had a lot of friends, and so that experience was really fun because here I was, this 15-year-old kid. I had not taken any classes at the high school at this point. I met a lot of people that night.
Yeah.
Like, it was cool. I got a lot of exposure to the high school crowd in Herman because of that night, and so even
Yeah.
though, like, that was, like, probably the cringiest thing I did, was getting up in front of that crowd and playing that awful metal music that nobody liked, it was honestly one of the best nights of my life.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I very similarly, I also played guitar. And same as you, I would, they 30 minutes a day, I would play for hours. And especially
Yes.
when I started learning how to play more lead guitar, I would
Yep.
play the same guitar lick over and over and over again. And I remember one day my sister barging in my room because we lived in a tiny little house, and she goes, "Are you ever going to stop?" Because it was just hours, the same thing over and over and over, just like slight
Yeah.
differences, right? Or changing the
Yeah,
tone
you're, like,
on the
perfecting
guitar
it.
amp. Exactly,
Yeah.
just perfecting it. And I'm like, and I'm sitting there going, "Well, if I wanna be John Mayer someday, I have to do this," and
Yeah.
she's like, "You're not gonna be John Mayer."
You're
Sure enough,
not.
I'm not gonna be John Mayer, but oh my gosh, yeah, and then, dude, I also had a band. The choreographed dances, I mean, at one point, we wanted to be the All American Rejects or, like, Fall Out
Yep.
Boy or something like that, so we just kind of were like, we would dress like that and act like that and wear guitars, like, at our
Yes.
knees and all the stuff, and it's just
Yep.
it's so dumb looking back on, but at the same time, I don't really regret it because it's
Absolutely not.
just such fun memories.
It's such a fun memory. I remember that night we found a phone, like, that same night of the Palooza, we found a phone in the grass, and we're like, "Oh, crap. We gotta figure out who this belongs to." So we
Yeah.
took the phone, which was a mistake because then the police got called, and they found us, and we had the phone, and so, like, we were being accused of stealing the phone, and I it was
Yeah.
no regrets, man. Memories.
High school is, like, the best. It's, like, the
Yeah.
best and worst time because
Yep.
there's so many things to be, like, cringed out and be like, "Oh, it was terrible," but at the same time, it's like, but we all did it together, and anytime I
Yep.
get together with my high school buddies, it's just like, we just remember the most cringy stuff we ever did, and it's hilarious. It's just hilarious because, like, some of us are parents now, and some of us are, like, doing completely different things, and it's like, it it's great to just we mock each other with it. I think it's just what
Yep.
it is. It is, but it's all it ends up all being equal because we all were the cringiest people in the world. So, anyway, oh, dude, Adam, this has been so fun. I've
Absolutely.
loved getting to know more about your homeschool experience because it is very different than mine. It's very different than a lot of people who have been on the
Yeah.
show. And the fact that you have two kids who are school age is awesome because kind of gets to actually hear not the hypotheticals of like, well, what would you do if you had kids? But it actually getting to
Right.
hear from somebody, this is the thought process behind it, and here's how we
Yeah.
want to be involved in our kids' life is amazing. Um, and just like, I don't know. I love you and Bailey. You guys seem like amazing parents to me. Anytime I chat with either of you,
Appreciate it, man.
I'm like, you guys, it's so clear you love your kids. It's so clear you want the best for them. Um, and and that's just, I don't know. It warms my heart. Let's just say that.
Well, thank you for saying that because it's important to hear. Because there are times where I'm like, "God, this whole dad thing is not it, man." But then
uh,
again, it is, it's
yeah,
just in the moment, it can feel like a challenge, but
yeah,
it's encouraging to hear people see that the fruit of that labor,
yeah,
even through just something as frivolous and unimportant as social media, you're able to pick up on
yeah,
that, so
yeah.
it's meaningful.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, any last words before we sign off?
This has been a great experience, honestly. I legit thinking before starting the show today, I was like, "What are we even gonna talk about, man? Like, homeschooling?
Yeah.
I guess." And, it's actually been, I feel like, a really fruitful, positive conversation. It's been enjoyable. You're a great host, and I just thank you for
Well,
the
thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you. I mean, the point I really have wanted this show to be a space, one, to share stories, to reminisce,
Yeah,
to know that you are not alone in any
yeah,
of those thinkings. Because for many years, even though I had so many homeschool friends growing up, that I know had similar experiences. I sat for so many years just being like, no, my experience is so weird. It's like such a bubble. Nobody else has had that. And so even getting to just chat with you, who it's like, you were not a part of my bubble. You had your own bubble, but like there are
mhm,
shared commonalities there. So it is not it is not an individualized thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
yeah,
And that's really the point of this is to build a community of people who we had similar experiences and we can get together and like we were talking about, getting together with buddies and reminiscing about our cringy high school stuff. It's like, yeah, I
yeah,
want to get together with people and reminisce about cringy homeschool stuff
yeah,
together. So, Adam, this has been amazing. Thank you so much to our audience. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you've got questions for me, if you got questions for Adam, you can, shoot me a DM, shoot me a message. EXHS Club on pretty much all the social medias. I know TikTok's going to go away here soon, sadly, but Instagram, it will be
yeah, I'm
there.
not happy about that.
Yeah, me neither. Or email me because email is definitely not going away at exhsclub@gmail.com. Yeah, shoot me questions. And like I said at the top of the show, share this with a friend. If you got somebody in your life who you just even just somebody came to mind while you were listening to this and you go, oh my gosh, I remember this homeschool friend. Track them down, send them this episode, send them your favorite episode, whatever it is. Get them in the club. We're the doors are open. So until next week, this has been the Ex Homeschoolers Club, and we'll see ya. All right, peace.